Good morning. My name is Rich Sloma. Welcome to today's New York State Archives presentation of conducting an inventory of paper records. Today's presenters are Jamie Brinkman and Vincent Commisso. The session is being recorded and will be available for future viewing. If you have any questions as we go through this webinar, please type them in the chat box to the right side of your screen, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. And now I will turn the presentation over to Jamie.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jamie Brinkman. I am the Records Advisory Officer for Villages in Cornell Cooperative Extensions, which means that I am the point person for those municipalities who are seeking guidance with the management of their records through their life cycle. And today I have with me my colleague, Vincent.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I am in the Scheduling and State Agency Services Unit here at State Archives. Just as our name implies, we schedule records. We also appraise records. We provide guidance and resources, and we also help manage and operate the State Record Center on the Harriman campus. And I'll talk a little bit about those things throughout the presentation.
Great, and away we go. So today you'll learn what an inventory is and other related things and terms. You'll also learn why you conduct an inventory, how to conduct one, and the aftermath of an inventory. What do you do now?
Okay, so some basic terminology. I want to make sure that everyone has a shared understanding of the basic concepts of records management that will inform our conversation about inventory and inventorying today. For those of you who are attending a State Archives webinar for the first time, some or even all of these concepts may be new. For our webinar faithful and our coworkers, they will be familiar. Whether you're new or attend our webinars regularly, understanding these concepts will help you make sense of today's presentation and inform the work you're going to do going forward. So let's begin with the foundational concept, a word you will hear many, many times today. In fact, every time you hear it, take a sip of your coffee so you're geared up for the poll and the Q&A at the end. I'm talking about the word record. A record is information created or received, but definitely recorded in some format during the course of business. Paper, microfiche, microfilm, compact discs, DVDs, a computer file like a Word document, an email, all of these are or can be records. But this implies that some things can't be or are at least not records, or what we refer to as non-records. And it isn't always easy to tell which is which, at least not without thinking about it. So, for example, imagine a sticky note that has a reminder you've written on it to call someone versus an email from your supervisor asking you to call that same someone. Or imagine an official copy of an agency annual report stored on your agency's shared drive versus the electronic copies of it that are emailed out to people. In these examples, the line between record and non-record seems clear, but it can get blurry fast. The sticky note versus email from your boss is pretty clear. The email is a record, the sticky note probably isn't. But what about the annual report example? The copy on the shared drive is definitely a record and may even be the official or record copy, since it's the one from which other copies are derived. But I could see a scenario where the copies emailed out could also be records, at least for those who also work in government and are receiving them. It is difficult to have a hard and fast rule about what records and non-records precisely consist of, and it depends on context. Suffice it to say that once you spend enough time with records, you will generally be able to spot them and also have a sense of when something isn't a record or isn't the record copy. They're hard to define sometimes, but you can get to a place where you'll generally know them when you see them. That's going to be important soon enough when we talk about inventorying. Now that we've walked through the first fundamental building block, if you will, I want to move on to the next one, the record series. A record series could be as simple as a standard form that your agency or unit collects on a regular basis. Think of a job application or a request for time off form, things like this. But let's say those forms don't stand alone, but instead end up as part of a file. Go back to the job application example. The application form is just one piece of an application file in a human resources office someplace, right? In that file, you might find resumes, cover letters, educational transcripts, reference letters, copies of driver's licenses, etc. The record series now isn't just the application form, it's an application file. This bundle of stuff taken together, this is the record series. If you stop to think about it, you probably can think of examples in your office or your unit akin to the job application form on the one hand and akin to the job application file on the other. So we have 2 building blocks down, 2 more to go. We've progressed from the concept of a record, including by extension the concept of a non-record, to the concept of a record series. But not all records are created equal. We don't, or at least shouldn't, try to keep everything forever, right? That's the question a records schedule, more properly known as a records retention and disposition schedule, helps us to answer. A record schedule is the tool, the mechanism, that provides both state agencies and local governments with rules governing the minimum period of time records must be retained, as well as what the final disposition for the record should be, whether the records are to ultimately be destroyed or permanently preserved, and for state agencies, this would be done by the state archives. You'll find that information in the schedule for the records you're looking at. Just as an aside that will become more relevant shortly, I want to note that for state agency records, okay, for our state agency folks on the call today, the record schedules will also tell you when a record series becomes inactive. State agency staff, please keep this in mind for future reference, especially if you transfer records to the State Records Center, as it is an inactive record storage facility. Some records have short retention periods, while others have longer ones. It all depends on the nature and significance of the record. Local government listeners, you'll find your retention schedules in the LGS1, and state agency staff who are listening, you will find yours in either the state general schedule and or in and amongst your agency-specific record disposition authorizations, otherwise known as RDAs. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry. These will come up again later in the presentation, and you can always contact the scheduling unit about them. So that's record schedules. The final fundamental concept that I want to explore and which will help you later as you think about what an inventory is and what it does is the concept of the records life cycle. If records and record series introduce you to the basic stuff of records management, the what of records management, and records retention schedules introduce you to the tool or mechanism through which that stuff is retained and disposed of, then, as the name suggests, the records lifecycle helps us to think about records not as something static or existing at a single moment in time, but as something that has a different status depending upon where they are in the record cycle. This answers the question of when they are. Are they newly created? Are they being accessed on a regular basis by staff and thus in the active part of their life? Has some time elapsed since they were created and regularly used, and now they're hardly touched and inactive? Are they not only inactive, but have they satisfied the minimum amount of time they must be retained as per their retention schedule and are ready for their final disposition? Each of these concepts will come into play as part of our discussion about inventorying, because when you're inventorying, among other things, you're going to be using these concepts to help make sense of the records you encounter and to help you manage them better. Now that we have the underlying concepts down, what exactly is an inventory? Well, the word inventory can have a few different meanings. It can refer to to what you have in your office, storage area, or anywhere else. When used this way, an inventory is a thing, it's a noun, referring as it does to the stuff you have, whatever it may be. In the context of records management, the stuff are records and record series. On another level, though, inventory can be a verb, as in to inventory. And that's the idea that inventorying is about the process you undertake to learn more about the stuff you have, records and record series. And this is what Jamie's going to get into shortly. But before she gets into how to conduct an inventory, we need to think about why we would want to do it. Our saying you should do it is nice, but you actually doing it requires that you actually want to do it, or even if you don't actually want to do it, at least understand the real need for conducting an inventory of some kind periodically. Now, again, sticking with the context of records management here, the term inventory conjures up a few images for me, and I want you to think about whether any of these kinds of places are familiar to you. I think of offices. I think of cubicles. I think of random unused cubicles in said offices. I think of closets, basements, random unused rooms in your building, desks, drawers, filing cabinets, unused chairs, shelves and shelving. I think of pretty much anywhere and in and or upon anything where records could be kept. While some of these places are better than others for storing records, one of the key goals of an inventory is to learn about your spaces and places, to learn where things are. Once we know where things are, we're on our way to having physical control of them. Now, while there's more to physical control than just knowing where things are, like knowing that your records are housed properly and what condition they're in, our first goal is to locate them and know where they are, as this is the basis for everything else. So, starting the process of gaining physical control is a critical first step, a prerequisite for everything else that follows. As important as it is to know where things are and that they're physically safe and sound, it is just as important to understand the records. What is their function and purpose? Why are they organized the way that they are? Why are they grouped with or near other records? How often are they accessed? How long must they be retained? How can they be gotten rid of? And probably a whole host of other questions that get at their significance to your unit or agency, as well as the relationship of the records to other records you possess. Taken together, this in the broadest sense, okay, very broad sense, is the process of gaining a kind of intellectual control of the records. There's a more specific sense of intellectual control focused on archival records, but in the context of inventorying records for records management purposes, which is what we're primarily talking about today, we're thinking about this at more of a macro level. You aren't looking to describe your records for public consumption so much as you're looking for information that helps you make informed decisions about how to manage them in the least bad way possible.
Have to unmute myself. Thanks, Vincent. So Vincent gave us a good foundation. Now we are going to talk about how to plan and complete an inventory. But first, as promised, a little bit of homework. While you're listening to us speak, think about the records management work you've done. Does any task or project you've completed or worked on sound similar to what we're about to describe? Hold your thoughts for now. There will be a poll a little bit later on in the presentation so you can share your thoughts. All right, we've reached the planning phase. So the first and maybe one of the most important steps to planning any project is to scope it out. You want to ask yourself questions like, what type of inventory am I doing? What data is being collected and how is it being recorded? What order is the project going to be completed in? And who's responsible for what? Answering these questions, as well as the ones on your screen, help ensure that a project plan is sound and that any potential issues or conflicts have been thought of and addressed. Once you finish scoping, the planning continues. With an inventory, you'll want to create buy-in. You'll want the support of not only your governing body, but department heads or unit heads as well. Sometimes offering a chance to meet and answer questions can be helpful. A meeting can also give you a chance to assure staff members that the inventory isn't meant to judge theirs or their predecessors' records management methods. It's a chance to help make records easier to use and find, as well as possibly free up space, which is probably much needed. You'll also want to set and share a timeline, even if it's an estimate, of when you'll be inventorying certain departments and how long it'll take you. Just remember to be flexible. Things happen, and sometimes things can go a little off schedule for you or the department being inventoried. When scoping the project, you might have determined that your government or state agency was going to hire staff to help you conduct the inventory. Once they're hired, you'll want to train them in what each office or unit does, what kind of records are being inventoried, and any inventory procedures that you may have already established. Another step in the planning phase is to inform all staff, not just your governing body or department heads, about the upcoming project. share your schedule with them, be open to questions and concerns, and reemphasize that this isn't about judgment. Lastly, and this one is specifically for state agencies, contact the scheduling unit for already existing RDAs. The RDAs already contain a lot of information about record types your agency holds. You can use them while conducting the inventory, matching records to established RDAs and making notes of updates that should be made. For example, the RDA you're using covers record types that have now become broader or more narrow in function. That RDA might need to be updated to reflect that change. This may seem like a lot. Trust me, it sounds like a lot. But putting in a lot of effort into the planning phase, a project like a survey or inventory can run a lot smoother. Now, you might have heard me, you might have caught me just say the word survey. What is a survey? Well, a survey is a less detailed version of an inventory. Now, while surveys collect only some of the information an inventory does, there are benefits to them as they can be completed quicker than an inventory, and a needs assessment can still be created. We'll talk about needs assessments a little bit later on in the presentation. Surveys can be beneficial to larger organizations that have a lot of records. Otherwise, an inventory could take you 2, maybe 3 years. It can also be beneficial to organizations with limited resources. Say you're the RMO for a smaller organization and want to get a handle on what records there are and how many there are, but unfortunately you don't have the time or money for a full-fledged inventory. In this case, a survey might be a useful tool for you. All right, so we've done our planning. We may or may not have done a survey beforehand. Now it's time to conduct the inventory itself. You'll want to contact the supervisors and remind them about the inventory and provide a tentative schedule of when you'll need access to their records and staff. You might need to speak to the staff to ask them questions about the records, so it's good to get an idea of when they'll be around. You can also create an office map. The map can help you visualize the physical layout of each space containing records and the storage equipment being used. It can help provide location information for records, or it might show you if there's potentially open space for new ones. A map can get outdated pretty quickly though, so it's always a good idea to add a date to the map. There's a good example of an office map in our inventory and planning publication, which is available online. So as we know, because Vincent talked about it before, conducting an inventory is collecting data on what you have and where. So how are we going to collect this data? Well, you could use the Records Inventory Data Worksheet, a template that was created by staff here at the State Archives. You can see a screenshot of part of it on your screen. A blank and fillable PDF version is available online, so you can download and print copies to use if you prefer paper and pencil, or you could always download it and use it on your computer in its electronic format. The template we offer is just that, it's a template. You can use it if you find that format useful, but you can also use any other worksheet, spreadsheet, or document that has fields for capturing important information like the record creator, so the department or unit, the record series title, and the retention schedule, number, and retention period. There are some items, however, that shouldn't be included in your inventory. You don't want to include non-records like blank forms, personal papers, and publications from an outside source. Obsolete records or records that have already met their retention period should also be excluded. These records can immediately be disposed of. That's why it's a good idea to keep some disposition forms handy while you work. That way you can fill out the forms as you go, and they will just need a review and signature when you destroy them. A template and instructions on using the form that we've created here at the State Archives is available on our website, but similar to the data worksheet, you can always create your own as long as it's capturing similar information to ours. So here we have some helpful tips for collecting the data to keep in mind. You'll want to consider the future use of the data sheets or any document that you use to collect the information. Other people might need to use the worksheets and the tools you created from them, so you want to avoid a few things like jargon, informal titles, and abbreviations. You'll also want to use the name of the office instead of the name of the office holder. This way, future users are not trying to decipher your code or remember somebody who may have retired 20 years ago. If you're using a paper copy of a worksheet, use pencil. Mistakes happen, and you might find new information that you need to update while you work. If you plan on using paper, you can also fill out the repetitive fields like the department or unit before making copies. It leads to less writing in the long run. While you're conducting the inventory, you'll also want to keep a list of observations you have while conducting the inventory. These observations are things that may not necessarily have a place on the data worksheet that you're using. So this can include things like the condition and housing of the records, for instance. For example, if we're looking in a filing cabinet, which is effectively the housing for the records, we're looking to see if the documents inside are crumpled, frayed, or torn, or if they're the way they're supposed to be, and consider the frequency of how often those records are being accessed. We can also look to see if the filing cabinet works properly and to see just how full it is. I'm sure we all have experience with overfull filing cabinets and know how that can lead to damaged records. You might also notice problems with the organization of your records. For example, someone might have organized purchase orders going back to the 1980s in alphabetical order. This is a problem as purchase orders can be disposed of after 6 years is for local governments. It also makes it difficult to access records from specific years, as you would have to know each vendor you worked with in any given year to be able to pull that record. Lastly, follow your plan and schedule, but be flexible. Things happen, emergencies pop up, and they might take you off course, but it's okay. You can always adjust. You've collected the data, now you have to store it. If you've used paper worksheets to conduct your inventory, you'll want to copy the information into an electronic inventory. The electronic inventory can be stored in a database that is a document, spreadsheet, or a database management system. Just as long as the fields in the electronic inventory that you're creating matches the fields on your worksheet. It'll make it a lot easier to move the data from one place to the other. The State Archives has a Microsoft Access database template available online, and I also believe spreadsheets are pretty popular for municipalities that have completed an inventory and planning grant with the help of consultants. But at the end of the day, it all really depends on what works best for you, for your government or agency.
Okay, everybody. So Jamie's walked you through the how, I walked you through the what and the why. So, do any tasks or projects you've done or hired a records management consultant for sound or feel like what we've described? We're going to try our hand at a poll here. If you guys could take a look at that and respond, that'd be great. And if you'd like, you can also share an example in the chat. I'll give you two from my own experience, one in local government, one in state government. In local government, I had the pleasure of working for a county clerk. And for those of you who are familiar with county clerk's offices, there's depending on how old your county is, you may have really old deed volumes, those oversized behemoths. Well, we had like thousands of them. And we did an inventory of them. And to access them, which was a little difficult, you needed a scissor lift. They're wrapped in our case, they were wrapped in archival paper. We wanted to make sure that the paper was in good shape and that the deed book inside was in good shape, that the deed volume was safe and sound, and that the correct volume was in the correct paper. Sometimes things can get lost or misplaced or mixed up, especially if you have a few volumes out at a time. And we systematically worked through every single deed volume to ensure that they were all accounted for. So it takes time, it takes some planning, but if you do it and stick with it, and sticking with it is the most important part, you will get through it. But after I left local government and went to state government, it was right before COVID. So the summer of 2020, which seems like a million years ago now, I had the good fortune of doing an inventory project as things sort of slowed down for obvious reasons, and got to work through case files for a certain unit of a certain agency. And a big part of that was recording information about the case files, what was going on there, the names on them, so on and so forth, and to build a giant spreadsheet with all the relevant information. These were records that the archives were potentially interested in, so it was win-win. The unit gains better physical and intellectual control, and we gained some information about records that we thought may potentially be archival. It was the kind of thing that I didn't do every day, but I did it many days, and I chipped away at it and eventually got it done. So you can do the same thing. If I can do it, anyone here can do it. So Jamie, where does that place us? Where are we at?
Well, we still have a few people working on the poll. They have a few more minutes left, but it actually seems like it's pretty split even. We have quite a few people who have completed one in-house or they've had a consultant help. We also have ones who haven't been able to do it quite yet, but they're in the right place to learn how. Um, Me personally, I haven't done an inventory, but I know that there's a lot of local governments out there that I've worked with that have had some success working with a consultant to do the inventory and dispose of some records that were found to be obsolete. All right, I think we might wrap up the poll. I think I can share the results with people. Um, this is a new thing that we are trying, so
We're
bear with
breaking the
me.
fourth wall.
Yeah. Um, okay, I think might have successfully shared the poll results with everyone. You can see, it's actually very great. It's great to see. It looks like there's more people that have completed a one than haven't, but that's okay. I mean, you can see that amongst all of us that there are people like you're not alone. There are people who haven't had the chance to conduct one yet and maybe are ready to get started. So,
Excellent. All right. So far we've talked about why an inventory should be conducted and how to conduct one. And now we're going to go over what you can do with what you've learned. To that end, we put a list of things together that you can do based on this information and your observations that you collected. And they aren't mutually exclusive things so much as they're mutually reinforcing. They are a needs assessment, a formal records management plan, an opportunity to appraise and schedule your records, and related to this, a chance to develop an office schedule. And last but certainly not least, it's everyone's favorite. It gives you the chance to organize the disposition of your records. If you don't need them, get rid of them. Jamie and I will go into more detail about each one now.
right. So the first product that you can get from your inventory is a needs assessment. A needs assessment is a list of your government or agency's records management problems and their solutions. The needs assessment can be as detailed as a full-fledged report, or it can be as simple as a list or table like you see on your screen. To take it a little bit further, you don't necessarily have to come up with the solutions by yourself. If you're struggling with this aspect of an assessment, you can always contact your RAO or the scheduling unit. You might be lucky state agencies, Vincent's the ones that's going to pick up the phone. A needs assessment is a
Yeah, that's
building
me.
block. A needs assessment is a building block for your records management plan, which we'll talk about next. So the records management plan is something that's created using both your inventory data and the needs assessment. It's a roadmap that can be created by your organization for short-term and long-term goals. A good records management plan will answer 3 questions. What is the present situation of your records? What goals do you have to change, improve, or develop your program? And how will you achieve your goals? You can see how a needs assessment fits in, right? A records management plan takes the information from it, the issues or problems you identified, and creates a framework of how and when you'll accomplish your goals to rectify them. The plans can vary in size, being a short range plan that covers 1 to 3 years, a mid range plan covering 3 to 6, or a long range plan that covers 6 to 9 years. Some governments and agencies might find it helpful to have all 3. Having a plan, no matter the size, is helpful for annual budget requests. Your goals and how you want to accomplish them are already listed. Extra steps might be required, like obtaining quotes, but the foundation will be there. A records management plan also provides a clear and concise way for you as the RMO to explain your records management program to governing bodies, fellow staff members, and the public. The plan shows where you are and where you want the program to go. You're
Okay,
just
now
really
it's my
excited for
turn.
your slide, huh,
Yeah,
Vincent?
right, right. Very, very excited to talk about appraising and scheduling. So while doing the inventory, you're going to encounter all kinds of things and all kinds of records. For local governments, you may encounter records, the schedule for which you can't put your finger on. If you aren't sure which schedule from the LGS to apply, don't panic. I remember when I worked in local government, I remember feeling so overwhelmed by the retention schedule sometimes. I know some of you out there know what I'm talking about. There's so many of them, and it isn't always clear which one is right, and you can't just put your finger on which one it is. I think I saw a question or two that reflects that sentiment in the chat. And those were in the days before the LGS one. But don't be intimidated by the size of the LGS one. Just stay focused on the kinds of records you have, and you will find them in there. But let's say you find a schedule that might apply to the records, or more than one schedule that seems like it might apply to them, right? You're not sure. This is very common, so again, don't worry. Figure out what the record is, what it does or what it's for, and contact your regional advisory officer. This time I get to return the favor. You can call Jamie. They will help you determine which schedule to use and apply it to the records. In the event that this record is truly new or unique, or has somehow been otherwise missed in the LGS1, the state archives will create a new schedule to cover those records, to cover that record series. For state agencies, the scenario I just described happens to you too, but instead of contacting a regional advisory officer, you contact my unit, Scheduling and State Agency Services, and we will help you determine whether you're dealing with records that are covered under the general schedule or if there's an agency-specific RDA that can be applied. As we mentioned earlier, we can supply you with the RDAs appropriate to your unit up front and also help you determine if they need to be updated or if new ones need to be created. As things would have it, for the past several months, I've been increasingly involved with our operations at the State Records Center. When you submit a list of inactive records that you would like to transfer to be stored here, I'm the person, because that's where I am today, I'm the person who reviews that list and makes sure you're applying the right retention schedule. It's often at that point, right when you need to get those records out of your office because you're out of room, that I'm the bearer of bad news, that the schedule you're relying on isn't right, and we can't take the records until we find the appropriate one. You very likely aren't thrilled by this news because you're under pressure to get the records out of the unused cubicle in your office because a new hire starts in a week. We work together frantically to figure out what the records are and find the right schedule for them, or if need be, initiate the process of creating a new one that either I or someone else in my unit helps you finalize. And all is well in the world again. The cubicle is again usable. But if you conduct a records inventory periodically, everything that I just described is coming out in the wash at the worst possible moment doesn't happen. You know what records you have, how they're organized, which schedule to apply, and how to transfer them to us for storage. If you aren't sure, and you know you aren't sure, and you contacted us well in advance, we can help you obtain the answer. That alternate universe of stress I just described doesn't happen. So that's scheduling. But the other side of the records analysis and evaluation coin is appraisal. Appraisal is sort of like scheduling in that we analyze the records, but when we appraise records, we're trying to determine if a case can be made that the records possess enduring historical value. It's a key phrase right there, and should be kept permanently. For local governments, you will see some schedule items in the LGS1 that have been identified as archival or historical. We use those a little interchangeably, and must be permanently preserved. For some records, it's more of a judgment call. In the introduction of the LGS1, you can find questions and criteria that will help guide you to make this determination. I recommend contacting your RAO to discuss records that you think may be archival, and they'll work with you to think through it. If you conduct an inventory, you'll know which records are archival or may be archival, and be able to get determinations made and the records properly stored if they are to be kept for future generations, for posterity. State agencies, for you, the general schedule identifies some record series which are or arguably are archival. Sometimes there's a little evaluation involved, as do your agency-specific RDAs. Sometimes, though, you encounter records frequently ones which seem old and/or records which seem really important, and you aren't sure. When that happens, and maybe you can't find the RDA to boot, when that happens, please pick up the phone and call us. We will appraise the records and determine if they're archival. Again, the same logic applies where inventorying is concerned. If you do it periodically, you'll know that there's potential archival records out there and call us with time to spare, rather than when you're about to relocate your office to an entirely new building and need to clean everything out. Are we picking up on the theme here? The inventory is a records management tool. It buys you time and can give you peace of mind. You have to work it into your schedule. It's very hard to do, but it can be done, and I think many of you have benefited by it. So, a spin-off of that are office schedules, right? The cliff notes of schedules. These take the information from the inventory, particularly record series titles and the retention schedule item and the period, of how long you have to retain them, and makes a mini retention schedule for a particular office or department. There's no reason why, for instance, to go back to my own experience, a county clerk's office needs to know what purchasing's records are. They don't need those schedules. Maybe they buy stuff and need to have some familiarity once in a while, but probably not. Right? They need to know county clerk's record schedules first and foremost, right? And the reverse is also true. Someone in purchasing doesn't need to know how long to keep a deed book. It's irrelevant to their work. So office schedules can be a lot easier for staff to use because it's tailored to them specifically. For units of state agencies, again, this also holds true. We can provide you with RDAs and retention schedules developed specifically for your unit. If it wasn't developed for your unit, then you probably can't use it. There are a few exceptions. General schedule being obviously the glaring one, right? Everyone can use the general schedule for generic or general items. But within a given agency, the RDAs are tailored to specific units. And so someone in one unit can't just take and borrow the RDA from a different unit. That's not how it works. So we help you figure all of that out. And because if you inventory as well, it's going to help you figure out where there's gaps. You may say, you know what, since the last time we did a bunch of scheduling with you, State Archives scheduling unit, we're doing some new functions, so new records are being created. Or we're doing a lot of those same functions and we've even expanded it. We need to update the RDA to reflect this sort of more expansive concept of function here. Familiarize your coworkers with the schedule. You would be shocked by how many people just don't know what record schedules are available to them. It's not necessarily a surprise. It's not a judgment. It's just the reality. Very few people besides ourselves actually get paid to do records management, to be blunt. It's one of those duties as assigned. So often it's sort of passed down from one generation of worker to the next. And that can be useful, but what happens if there's a breakdown in that passing on of knowledge? So someone in the unit really needs to be the records liaison with the records management officer and have the scheduling unit on speed dial. That's what we're here for. Our colleagues Sarah and Arthur gave a really useful webinar about what office schedules are and how to create one back in the 2024 spring session. And you can find that recording on our website or on our YouTube page. Jamie, I think we're muted here.
I am. I still haven't mastered the
By we,
mute
I mean
button.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, apparently I still need to work on that skill. But in addition to those items, a physical product of a survey and or inventory is space. While conducting an inventory, you might be able to identify and note records that met their retention requirements and are ready to be disposed of. This can free up space for in a record storage area for newly active records and or space and filing cabinets and office space for newly created active records. If you don't use a disposition form when conducting an inventory, that's okay. This is another good point to fill that form out. These forms can help you track records through the end of their life cycle and then some, as the disposition forms have a 6-year retention period of their own. If you're foiled for a record that has been destroyed, you can use the form, if it's within the 6 years of destruction, to confirm that it was destroyed in accordance with the law. Past that, you can still refer back to the LGS 1 and say, we destroyed this in accordance and we're being legally compliant. Forms can also be used to report out to your governing body. It helps them give them a sense of what work is being done annually. Being able to say we dispose of X amount of records, whether it's every month or once a year on a disposition day, you can point to this and show that your records management program is being maintained and properly managed. When you dispose of the records, you'll want to make sure you're choosing the right type of disposal for the records you have. Some counties offer free secure shredding, which is great. For state agencies, there should be bins in your building for the confidential shredding of records through the state archives waste paper recycling contract. Local governments can also take advantage of this contract if they're within the mileage range for pickups or drop-offs. But for those who don't have any of those options, we can help you identify a vendor.
So let's tie it all together. First, remember that one size does not fit all. Maybe you find out that a different office or agency did some large wall-to-wall inventory throughout the entire local government or agency. That's good for them, terrific, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything for you. Yes, it shows what could be done under a specific set of circumstances, but those circumstances aren't necessarily your own. You need to do what you can with what you've got. If all you can manage is inventorying a set of filing cabinets, so be it. If inventorying those cabinets helps you solve a problem in your office, then that work is a success. It also is a stepping stone. Maybe you did filing cabinets today, but you now have the confidence to do an entire storage area tomorrow. And who knows, you might really get the inventory bug and start working your way around the place, one space at a time. What matters is that you take the underlying philosophy of inventorying, right? It's a records management tool, and the technical points we've shared about it, and apply them to your situation. Customize what we've talked about for your needs. Whether large or small, if you do that, you're on the right track.
That's right. And having taking time to plan, having patience, and being flexible can ensure that while you might veer off course, you can ultimately stay on the right track and complete your inventory.
Absolutely. So pick our brains. You're not alone. If you want to strategize and bounce ideas off of someone, call us. I love to talk. Local governments, contact your RAO. They love to talk too. State agency staff, call the Scheduling and State Agency Services unit. We're here to help you.
And if you need some additional help outside of us or your fellow local governments or state agency members, this one's specifically for local governments, sorry, state agencies. But another way you could help yourself is to consider applying for the Local Government Records Management Improvement Fund grant. A single local government applying for an inventorying and planning project could request up to $75,000 in funding. And oftentimes you'll see those types of grant involve a consultant coming in and assisting you with that inventory work. And a nice thing about the grant is that there's no matching required.
Right. It's somebody else's money, so you should
Yeah.
spend it. Q&A time. I know some have already been put in the chat.
Yes, we do have some questions.
We have our producer, Rich Sloma, on the line, calling in from the producer's box.
And if I could just add one thing, if folks are on here and have not, for local governments, if you have not had a conversation and you do not have a close working relationship with your New York State Records Advisory Officer, I strongly suggest that you develop one, because the folks we have, such as Jamie and the others in the field, you'll find them to be lifesavers. And for state agencies, definitely contact Vincent and his colleagues in the state agency scheduling services unit. They're here to help you out. It's free advice, free help. So definitely do contact them. So we'll start with some questions here. We've got had a few questions here from Kelsey about, she asks, how does records disposition take place? Does a board have to approve disposition? And she asks, where can I get disposition forms?
Okay, so I can take this one at least for the local government side of things. So records disposition takes place kind of when you want. I mean, you can set up a annual day. I know a lot of people choose to do it. I think it's April is Records Management Month. Choose to do disposition, choose like a set of days and say, we're going to go through all of our records from the previous we're going to go through all of our records and see which ones met their retention requirements as of the end of last year and dispose of it. You don't need to have a board approval for disposition as long as those records don't fall into any of the categories that need special approval for disposition. That's part of the regulations of the Commissioner of the Education, I believe. And we do have those available on our website. It's mostly, records that date before 1910, records that relate to employee relations. And then there's ones that may have had some damage due to like a natural disaster. They're all available online in all of their legalese. Um, and then the disposition form template that I referred to in our workshop in a few slides ago is available on our website underneath the section of records management. And then there's a section called forms and tools and forms, or it might be forms and tools, but it's underneath there. But you can always give us an email and we can put you in the right direction.
For state agencies, there's some similarities, but also some differences depending. So many of your records, the schedules for those records, have the records stay in the agency office, depending on how long the retention period is. For those, you would destroy those as prescribed by the schedule, by the RDA or the general schedule item. I use those two terms interchangeably. An RDA is a records retention schedule. A general schedule item is a records retention schedule. One is just general, one is just agency specific. So you would follow those in terms of disposing of the records, and there should be, and I think Jamie referred to it earlier, the waste paper contract, the CONFIDATA bins that are located in Many of the offices, certainly on the Empire State Plaza, in the high rises, as I like to call them, they're there, and you should be able to get rid of your records like that when they've met their disposition. But for records that are stored at the Record Center, which many of you out there may have or do have, those are my supervisor, Keith Swaney, who runs the Records Center, sends out a disposition notice 60 days prior to when they can be destroyed. And that gives people an opportunity to review what's up for disposition. And if we don't get a response, when that month comes up, we destroy them. Now, a month is usually, last I checked, 30 days or thereabouts. So we often will have people keep that in mind. We could destroy at the beginning of the month, or we could destroy at the end of the month. It depends on the flow of work. So pay attention to those disposition notices. And if you have questions, certainly contact Keith about those. When records now come in, we're really scrutinizing the transfer list to make sure that the retention dispositions and the RDAs all line up. Sometimes agencies will have records that they try and send to us, assuming that they're actually inactive, that really don't have that long of a retention period, and then they'll try and keep it much longer than that. We'll ask for a justification. We will push back. Our job is to support you, but also to sort of, make sure you guys are engaging good records management practices. You want to dispose of records when you can, because it's less stuff to manage. That's true for us here at the Record Center and State Archives, but that's true for you guys out in the agencies as well. Don't hang on to things any longer than you absolutely must. You want to do your due diligence. You have to follow the retention schedule. It's a legally binding document, but you don't want to go beyond it unless you have a compelling justification to do so.
Okay, have a question here from Camille. What is the most efficient method to identify the retention schedule in the LGS1? Is there a search function that brings you to the retention identifying number and the duration?
Yes. So there's a few different formats available for the LGS1. And the one that immediately comes to mind for me, especially with the search function you're mentioning, is the database that we have available online. There's a search, like a free form text box that you can type in like different keywords in, and it'll bring you up with results for anything that might have had that word in it. And then you can look at those results, which is a little bit less than 400 and something pages worth of retention schedule items, and make it a little bit easier to find the correct item that you're looking for.
Can I just add one thing? Because I see a question here. I just want to make sure I address this in case there's any confusion. This is coming from Tracy. Why would a local municipality have to send records to the Record Center? You wouldn't. I was speaking specifically to state agencies, just to be clear in the event that I wasn't. I hope that clears it up. I just put in the chat there a link to the LGS1 search page.
Oh, thank you, Vincent.
Sure.
Okay, I have a question here from Samantha. For time of disposition, would you still use the suggested form for electronic records? Is it the same process as it would be for physical records?
That's a great question. Off the top of my head, I think that it would be. I think this is a case where if the disposition form doesn't exactly match your needs for the electronic records, you can always edit it to update those fields to make it a little bit more accommodating. But electronic is just another format. You'd still want to treat those records the same as you would as paper copies of records.
Okay, we had a couple questions here about people asking, where can I get an office retention schedule specifically for our office?
Well,
Okay, Jamie, you start.
well, unfortunately, I don't think we have any of those necessarily available, like no grab and go options. There are some good examples of what our office schedules could look like in our, I know that I think it's publication number 41, but I'm blanking on the name of the publication. I think it has to do with records disposition and destruction but also with the creation of office schedules. I apologize. I still have a number of publications to memorize.
You've ruined everything, Jamie.
But you can always talk to your RAO too about coming up with a solution or potentially finding an easy way to identify records and create an office schedule of your own. And like I said, what we talked about in our webinar, there was a webinar a few months ago about creating an office schedule. Sarah and Arthur did a really great job of walking you through creating one. So give it a watch.
Okay, I have a question here from Camille. When purging records that have met their scheduled retention, what is the procedure to document the destruction of those records?
Sure. So that would involve using the disposition form that I mentioned, or something similar if it doesn't quite suit your needs. It's a PDF that's available. You'll want to note the record series, the record creator, so like the department or unit, and the dates that are being destroyed. I think you'd also want to mark down the retention schedule and the retention schedule item that you're applying to those records. So then you can use that information and point back to the LGS1, that nice big booklet, and say, this is our reasoning for destroying these records at this time. And then at the bottom of that form, there's a place for you to, as the RMO, to write your name, and then you can get approval from somebody else as backup.
Okay, Jessica
There's
asks,
Rich, before you go to the next one, for state agencies, there is an item on the general schedule for recording, for keeping track of dispositions. That's basically a way of showing that you've done your due diligence, and you keep. I think they have a 6-year retention, and that just tracks what you've destroyed. So just to add something there for the state agency side.
excellent point, Vincent. Thank you. Jessica asks, does your board, this is for local governments, does your board need to do a resolution stating the municipality will be following the LGS1? Or she asked, doesn't your board need to do a resolution stating the municipality will be following the LGS1?
It does. You'll want to have your governing board pass a resolution officially adopting the LGS1 as the retention and disposition schedule that you'll be following. And you're in luck. We also have a template available for that on our website in that forms and tools section of our website.
Okay, just checking here to see if we have any other questions. I may have missed a few. Okay, got Margaret asks, if a record is saved digitally, does a physical copy also need to be saved?
Depends.
So it depends. I feel like, and maybe you've all caught on to this, but it depends, or yes, but are probably two of our favorite phrases in the archives and records management world. But yes, you can. You want to keep in mind that if you are going to start keeping electronic records as your official copy of records, you'll want to pass a resolution. Your governing board will want to pass a resolution recognizing this. And well, again, we have a resolution template available online for this as well. Same section, forms and tools. But you'll also want to be mindful of the fact that if you are going to scan paper records with the intention of having the electronic copy be the official one and only copy, you're going to want to do a 100% quality control of those scans. Make sure that there's a one-to-one match, no page has been missing, and that those scans are legible and that they're readable and accessible, because you unfortunately don't get to have that oh crap moment and say, oh, we have to go back and scan this, because theoretically there's no paper record to go back to. So just a few things to keep in mind.
Yeah, you when you digitize something, when you scan something, a lot of people are under the impression, and I know today's about physical records, but I think this is a good time to say this. People think that they're somehow like escaping this record's life cycle of, birth, life, and then death or disposition. And they're not. It still applies to the electronic records just as much as it does to the physical records. And if you're going to make the decision as a unit, agency, or local government that you want to completely switch over for a given record series, or even all of your records, you need to keep this in mind. A lot of people who I've worked with will say, I'll say, well, how are you disposing the records that you've saved to your local area network or onto your right shared drive? And they'll go, what are you talking about? They're electronic. And I've said, yeah, no, I grasp the concept. And they go, but they're electronic. And I'm polite and diplomatic and say, yes, you plug it in, it turns on, I get it. But you still have to get rid of them. You're still responsible for managing those records. You can't escape it. When you make that switch, when you're trying to have surrogates, right, electronic surrogates for the physical or just a full swap, you not only need to check your images, as Jamie said, but I would go a step further than that and say all of your metadata, the data about those images has to also be reviewed. It has to be sound so you can find those images when you need to find them. Digitizing things, scanning things is a nice tool. It is not necessarily a cure-all for all your records management ills. And a lot of people fall under the sway of thinking that, well, because there's technology involved, that therefore it's necessarily superior and will solve all of our problems. It won't, because humans built it. So it's only as good as you are, and managing it's only as good as you are. It will do what you tell it to do and can help you, but it is a tool just like anything else. So you have to keep that in mind, sort of philosophically going in.
And we're at the end of our time here, a lot of time, but I did want to squeeze this one in here. Amy asks, I may have missed, but I haven't noticed any webinars that are specific to student records, BOCES, or school districts. Is there one planned for the future? And I was just going to throw in there that the records advisory officer for school districts and BOCES, Sarah Derling, just happens to be on this webinar as well as a participant. So I would mention to Amy, reach out to Sarah, and she is there to help you wade through all of your records management issues, training needs, um, and perhaps maybe I don't know if Jamie, you want to add anything to that?
Sarah's great, and she has a lot of knowledge. And if I think REOs typically can offer some tailored training to your organization or a group of similar organizations if they all want to get together and be able to help you with any records management things that you'd like to talk about with them.
Excellent. So, and folks, that's all the time we have for today. If we didn't get to your question, we apologize, but please do reach out to us. And Jamie, Vincent, any last words?
Thanks for joining us. I hope you're feeling excited. Maybe we created some buy-in for those who didn't get a chance to do their paper records inventory to maybe start with a filing cabinet.
Yes, thank you for joining us. As Jamie said, it's been a lot of fun. There's a lot of good questions. Rich put in the chat not our specific contacts, but the contact emails for our respective units. Any questions that you may have that you didn't feel didn't get answered or whatever, just send them there. We'll get back to you. The unit will get back to you, and you can do this. You just have to plan and work it in. And just like anything else, it's a project. Work it into the normal course of business. And when this comes onto the table, that means other things are going to have to come out off your plate. But if you do it, it will benefit you in the long run. That's true for local governments. It's true for state agencies. It is absolutely worth the time you put into it. And if you have to start small, so be it. You'll get the confidence to do more and more, and you just keep it rolling.
Great. Well, thanks everybody, and thanks for participating in the webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.